It's episode 85 of the Author Stories podcast. I'm your host, Hank Garner. Thank you so much for joining me for the show over these past 85 episodes. It's been a real pleasure and joy to bring them to you, and I hope you'll stick around for the next 85 or 800 or... I'm just happy to bring this show to you. I've got lots of great things coming up in the next weeks and months. The show is expanding and growing, and a new roster of writers signs on every day. This week, my guest is Glenn Cooper, a fascinating guy who is a true hybrid author in every sense. I think you'll get a lot out of this episode. But today's podcast is brought to you by Audible.com. You can get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/Hank. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your phone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. That's audibletrial.com/Hank. Now on to my interview with Glenn Cooper.
Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. I'm very excited today to have an author that I recently discovered, though he is no newbie to publishing by any stretch of the imagination. Glenn Cooper is the author of numerous books, and I'm excited to have him on the show with me today. Welcome to the show, Glenn.
Thank you, Hank. Glad to be here.
Yeah. So you've got a couple of series. The Will Piper series is one. Tell me, before we get into that, you have a rather storied journey to becoming a fiction writer. I always start the show by asking a variation of the same question. That is, when did you first know that you wanted to be a writer?
Well, I probably had inklings early in life because I was a real bookworm, a very, very avid reader, and books were certainly my best friends growing up. But I was in my early 30s. I was doing a medical research fellowship at Mass General Hospital in Boston, because I started off life as a medical doctor, and maybe it was kind of a right brain, left brain thing, but I was seemed to be searching for something to do to kind of flesh out the rest of my kind of brain and psyche. And I was browsing the Harvard Coop one day, one of the great bookstores in the country, and I fell on Sid Field's book on writing screenplays. And it was a small volume, and I browsed it, and it seemed very, very well written, and I kind of lost myself in that book for the next it's more than days or weeks, really months. And it occurred to me, maybe I can write a screenplay too. And using that book as my Bible, and it's still a book I recommend, number one, to anyone aspiring to write screenplays. I bashed out my first screenplay, and just kept rolling on scripts for about 20 years, and produced about 20 or 30 scripts with a real remarkable lack of success, I have to say, in terms of commercial results. I optioned a few and sold a couple, but I was always doing other stuff in life and never committed to doing the LA thing. But kind of that steady hobby and kind of learning how to think about writing and learning how to write better over time. It developed from that day that book caught my eye.
It's awesome. What made you make the leap from writing screenplays to wanting to write long-form fiction, novels, and such?
Complete frustration and almost a feeling of nausea starting my 25th script. where I played around with all sorts of different genres, kind of like throwing spaghetti on the wall, seeing what would stick, both in terms of my abilities, in terms of interest of producers and studios. And but I'd done a string of kind of high budget oriented studio only kind of films, and I was starting yet another one. I'm in well along in years at that point in my 50s, early 50s, and I just can't do it. I wrote the first 3 or 4 pages and said, why am I doing this to myself? It's going to be 4 months from now I'll have a first draft, and I might like it, but I might be the only one in the world who likes it. So I said, I'm going to try this as a novel instead. And that has always been kind of a word that scared me in terms of a personal endeavor, because the screenplay always seemed like it was doable. It was like eating a McNugget. You knew you could finish it, and the novel was a heck of a lot more to chew on. And I didn't like the idea of starting something and not being able to finish it. But I stuck with it. I used the same idea that the book that became Library of the Dead, my first published book. And a year later, I had a first draft, and then completely alien to the world of publishing, I went back to a bookstore and started getting books on how do you get published, and I learned about these things called literary agents and how to contact them, and that was a whole next saga, which I'm happy to talk about as well.
Sure. So you began with that book, and what was the first thing that you noticed about the process? How was writing a novel different from writing a screenplay? Of course, there's more detail, and it's not just simple stage direction. But was that kind of what first hit you, or what?
Yeah, exactly right. In screenplays, the work of fleshing out a sense of time and place and atmosphere and detail is up to a team of creative professionals, the director and art director and production designer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's a whole big group process. And all the screenwriter needs to do is write a few evocative words that can serve as a trigger to those people when they're starting to think about producing a script, and getting actually into the transition to being responsible to create that world myself, as every novelist has to do, involves a lot of creative energy and a creative talent, and in my case, tons and tons of research, because that book was a historical thriller, and most of my books have been heavily research intensive historical thrillers that kind of ripple into the modern times. So writing, learning how to write detail without in my own voice in a creative way that wasn't didactic or boring. Well, that was certainly the hardest thing to start to learn, and I can't say that I've now writing my 11th book now that I've still not mastered it, but I think I'm getting better at it.
One of my former guests on the show, Nick Cole, would describe himself as a part-time actor and writer, and he talks about how there's a lot of frustrated actors who become novelists because they can kind of use a lot of those same muscles that you would use in acting in writing, and it seems like script writing would be similar. Is that you can you take what the actor would have interpreted, and then when writing a novel, you then get to kind of play the role of screenwriter and actor when painting that. Would you agree with that?
No, I completely agree. And people often ask me, whether those were wasted years when I could have gotten into novel writing at a much earlier age and had a much more substantial body of work by this point in life. And I think if I had to do it over again, I might have truncated it a bit, but I like the idea of learning how to master screenplays first, because it gives you two legs up in novel writing, and one is, man, you got to be good at dialogue, and you have to have really authentic, natural rhythms in speech and language. If you don't, what do you have? Because you really are only writing dialogue. And the other thing is pace. To do most films, if they're not experimentals or commercial films at least, one scene needs to really drive right into the next scene, and both those kind of abilities, good dialogue skill and good pace are really handy for thriller writing. I'm probably like you if I pick up a book and I find that the first things that come out of a character's mouth are wooden and kind of clunky, I just can't move on. It's all the really good writers in the world have got speech patterns and dialects and intonations down well. So I'm pretty happy with that part of the foundation, at least. But it sure took me a long time to get there.
What is the is there a trick to writing dialogue?
Well, it's the trick is to listen to people speak.
Yeah.
And listen to people just walking down the road. And I'm not one of these guys who's got a little notebook in their hip pocket and write down little phrases that I hear all the time out and about. But you just need to be aware of the way people ramble, like I'm rambling right now. You can tell that I'm not reading something right now because it's just not polished enough. And that kind of a lack of polish, I think, is really super important when you're writing and reading a good piece of fiction.
Yeah. Another thing that I like to do is when you're out and about, watch people's mannerisms. Because good dialogue is more than just the words they say. There's certain inflections and things like that a good dialogue writer, will include those things that help build a character. That's fun to do too.
Yeah, and people are not just talking with their mouth; they're talking with their entire body, and being able to bring some of that kind of a body language, not in a heavy-handed way into your scene, but to pepper with, so the reader really gets a sense of is this a German holding himself rigidly, or is it an Italian flailing about with his arms?
Right. That's fun. Your books are historical thrillers. And you have a degree in archaeology as well. How does that inform your writing?
Well, I thought for a time that I wanted to be a professional archaeologist, and that's what my undergraduate degree is in. My thesis work was in European Paleolithic archaeology, and I was kind of torn at a pivotal moment, right? Leaving college, whether I was going to go to grad school in archaeology or medical school. And I applied to both. I couldn't decide. Got into programs in both and made a last kind of second decision that certainly changed my life in a lot of ways, and went into medicine instead. But never really lost my kind of passion for archaeology. I wound up marrying my archaeology boss's daughter. He was a real famous British archaeologist, and did work for him. And so even after I was married and doing medicine, I'd go on digs with him. And I couldn't keep up with it forever, in a really intensive way, but I was able to certainly weave archaeological themes and plot points into screenplays and now into novels. And I think I've got some archaeology references or wholesale plot lines in at least half my books. So it's kind of a way of keeping my hand in. We talked earlier. I think one of the books that you've been looking at is kind of a pure archaeological story called The Tenth Chamber, about a mysterious painted cave in France.
Right.
And that was probably, I'm not sure that's not my best book, but it's certainly the one I enjoyed researching the most, because I got to go back to places that I'd been earlier in life, the Périgord area of France, and visit all the great prehistoric painted caves, including Lascaux. So, and I enjoyed it so much, I named my media company Lascaux Media, and that's the company that I use to produce books in the U.S. and independent films, because I stayed in the film world a bit with kind of small budget film production.
Nice. When you get an idea for a book and you're say dealing with one of these historical mysteries, or when you run across maybe an article about some new archaeological discovery, what is it? How do you take that idea and then craft a story around that? I guess one of the things I'm always fascinated by is how someone can take a piece of real history and stay true to that history and the true historical context, but craft a piece of fiction around it that respects the original thing, but then brings a whole other story to life. Do you have a process that you use?
Yeah, it's kind of an ass backwards process because I've never been really good at doing these rip from the headlines kind of stories, and using real events as the starting point. I tend to kind of either start with an image, something that kind of has popped into my head and sticks there for a while and fascinates me, and I try to understand what's going on in my brain to generate that. As an example, my first book, Library of the Dead, started with a daydream when I was actually at that point I was the head of a biotech company in the Boston area, and I was sitting down one morning to read the Wall Street Journal the way I usually started my day, and I don't think it was anything I particularly was reading at the time, but an image flashed into my mind of an underground library, a large, vast underground library filled with ancient books, and I didn't know what kind of books they were, or where the library was, or what its purpose was. But it was such a kind of a captivating picture that I played with it for months and months until a story emerged, which became Library of the Dead. The other way I start books is thinking about large themes that interest me, because I don't tend to write kind of police procedurals or geopolitical thrillers or spy thrillers. I like stuff that has kind of a philosophical or religious kind of a nugget.
Mm-hmm.
So fate and predestination is a theme that I come back to time and again. The nature of evil, the kind of interface between faith and science, and how the two could be reconciled, and ideas tend to flow out of wanting to explore something kind of interesting to me personally that hopefully will be interesting to other people. So a little bit of philosophy that's got a thriller story with a lot of pace and action wrapped around it.
I'm in reading a couple of your works. I definitely pick up on this interest that you have of the intersection of science and faith, and the philosophical bent. How do you handle? How do you juggle these two things? Sometimes very disparate, ends of the spectrum, and have them cohabitate without coming across as preachy and having an agenda. I think a lot of writers struggle with this, and we all have something that we believe, but how do you keep that? How do you keep your personal feelings from bleeding into what you write?
Boy, you really hit the nail on the head. That's the most critical thing when you're doing this kind of thing. Rule number one: don't be preachy. Rule number two: don't be telling other people what they ought to believe.
Right.
Rule number three: don't reveal what you do believe, because that just ruins the whole thing. And I'm constantly asked on book tours and in interviews. You write about the Catholic Church. Are you a Catholic? You write about the nature of the afterlife. Do you believe that there's a heaven? My last series was a trilogy about a journey to hell, kind of a modern take on Dante's Inferno. And of course, people always ask, what's your conception of hell? And I always have the same answer, which gets to your question, is that I absolutely refuse to talk about my personal beliefs, because I don't want that to be the lens through which other people are reading the stuff. I want to ask questions and have people think and form their own opinions if they choose to. And if that's sort of the guiding light, that you're going to be presenting philosophical questions to often to a young audience. My readers tend to skew quite young, which I like. By that I mean 20 and 30-year-olds. Then it's often the only exposure they get to philosophy or to some of these religious scientific themes. So thou shalt not be a preacher. That's the mantra.
Yeah. Speaking of having a younger audience, do you feel like books like yours and ones that explore these deeper themes are kind of having a golden age? I mean, that there seems to be a lot of fiction that is dealing with some more supernatural elements and kind of where I guess where what we definitely understand bumps up against what we don't quite understand.
Yeah, I think especially in the YA field, that's been the case, and actually some of the more sophisticated stuff and great ideas are coming out of YA, and I always kind of chuckle at the meaning of YA, because I know when I was in the YA category myself, those were really adult themes and adult books.
Right.
So it's audiences have certainly matured along with a lot of other kind of societal maturations, but yeah, I think it's a great trend. You don't see it that much in adult thrillers. At least not in by most American authors. There's a lot more of that in European thriller writers, which may be why my books are way more popular and consistent top 10 bestsellers throughout Europe, and not quite as popular in the U.S.
Okay. And I want to talk about that for just a minute, about publishing and the U.S. market versus the European market. But before we switch gears and talk about that, for you, the listeners of the Author Stories podcast, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. All you have to do is go to audibletrial.com/Hank and sign up for a free 30-day free trial and get a free audiobook from me and Audible to try out their service. I was telling Glenn right before we started that I'm currently listening to the audiobook of The 10th Chamber, and it's narrated by Henry Labate, and it's an excellent production. Very cinematic in its in the way Labate handles the narration. Very engaging. It's a 13-hour audiobook, so for free you can you could listen to it on your commute for a couple of weeks, and that's a great way to stay entertained. If you go to audibletrial.com/Hank, sign up. Glenn Cooper has several books there to choose from. So if you've enjoyed listening to Glenn and you think that his books are something that you'd like to try out, then go to Audible and pick them up. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. So anyway, Glenn, let's talk a little bit about that. You have had tremendous success in the European market, and when did you start kind of realizing those trends?
Almost from the beginning of my publishing experience, Hank. I had a heck of a time finding a literary agent. That was a painful experience. Out of 66 query letters that I sent out, 65 said no, and only one said yes. But that's all it takes sometimes.
Right.
And within reasonably short order, I'd sold the book in 30 translations. So it was kind of a big debut out of the blocks, and everywhere around Europe it was released. Well, almost everywhere, with the exception of UK and Germany. It was released as a hardback with quite a lot of curation and great marketing. Super covers and a great marketing campaign and video book trailers, et cetera. And in the U.S., it was done as a paperback original, and it was almost from the get-go a big bestseller in Europe, really right out of the starting blocks. And in the U.S., it never really got those kind of legs at all, because paperback originals, they're kind of thrown out there without much support. There certainly are there's no system for getting paperbacks reviewed
Right.
as hardbacks. This is now, we're talking about 2008, 2009. So now it's impossible to get anything reviewed, pretty much. But back then there was still some hope in the U.S. And I certainly wouldn't denigrate the kind of volumes that I sold in the U.S. A few 100,000 copies, which is pretty good. I mean, it's very good, actually.
Yeah.
But I was selling millions of copies in Europe, and
Wow.
and that really was a pattern that stuck. Once you develop a reader base, they kind of look for your next books, and that certainly has been consistent in a lot of European countries, and inconsistent in the U.S. to the point where I, out of frustration, I decided that I wasn't going to let a publisher ruin my new babies, and I started publishing myself under my Lasco Media imprint about the same time that folks like you, Howie, and others were getting real traction with in the self-pub world. So I've been a hybrid for the last several books. Traditional releases in Europe, and self-published releases in the U.S. And I'd be real hard pressed to change that pattern right now.
Yeah, I would think not. Any idea what it is about the European sensibilities that seem to gravitate more toward your books than the American?
Well, they're complex books that tend to take a little bit more of a commitment than reading a kind of a straight thriller out of typical bestseller lists in the U.S. They often involve European locations, European characters, because I'm a Europophile, and they're more on the esoteric level than a lot of books that are that typically make the charts in the U.S. So something about it certainly comports with the European sensibility. Those most of my readers have a sense of history just unconsciously walking down the streets of the cities they live in. They have the history surrounds them, and there's more of an appreciation, I think, of how past events still have shaped and are shaping modern events. So maybe
right.
on a psychological level, they really connect.
What has your experience been with self-publishing here in the States? Has that been a positive experience for you?
Yeah, it has been positive. I've always been kind of business oriented and entrepreneurial. All those years I was writing screenplays, I was developing biotechnology medicines in small biotech companies, and so I was always out there building businesses and building brands. So it didn't scare me to try to go and do this myself. I've had help from my family. My son is a social media expert, and he's been doing all my publicity and social media. My wife is part of the venture, doing all our admin and back office stuff. So it's turned into kind of a family affair, which has actually been pretty satisfying, and the results have been terrific. Certainly, the economies have been far better as a writer than having books published as paperbacks in the States. I can't say that my attitude might have been different if the first book had been as big a success in the U.S. as it had been in Europe. I guess I probably would have stuck with traditional publishing at that stage, but that's not the way it worked out. And I'm happy to have the hybrid experience because I get really the best of both worlds.
Yeah, and the lesson I'm picking up from you is be flexible, and when you find your audience, embrace them wherever they are, and form your expectations to what's actually happening. That's
yeah, and I just still pinch myself every day that I get to be a full-time writer, and that and people want to pay to read my stuff. I mean, that's just even 11 books into this thing, and it still amazes me. It's terrific.
Yeah. Let's talk craft for just a minute. Your books are very complex, with plot points kind of weaving in and out. Are you an in-depth outliner, or kind of what is your process like when you begin a project? Do you have an idea of where it's going from the beginning?
Yeah, I absolutely do. When you're writing complex thrillers with interweaving plots and hopefully twists and turns and surprises along the way, it would be like going into the woods without a compass or a map. You're almost certainly going to get lost, and
right.
There's nothing more depressing than the thought of working on a project for 6, 12 plus months and saying, I don't know what the hell I'm going to do about this because I can't figure out how to fix it or how to end it. So so I won't do that. I do a lot of outlining and a lot of research, and I try to. I always know exactly how the book is going to end, almost right from from as soon as I get the first idea, and kind of drive to that ending. But use a kind of a flexible form of outlining where I at least at the first draft of an outline have got a pretty good idea chapter by chapter where this is going to go, but not put so much effort into it and so much detail that I get locked into stuff. It's better to be able to innovate and have characters come alive and do surprising things on a spontaneous kind of a way and not get so over plotted. So usually about halfway through a book, I'll have to redo an outline because it's changed, but I still know beginning, middle, and end, and rely really heavily on the outlining process. But I'll do my outlines aren't typically more than 10 pages or so. So spend a lot of time on it, but not invest them overly in detail.
Your newest series is the Pinhole, or the Down trilogy, and the first book is Down Pinhole. Tell me a little bit about that series.
Well, this was came out of my interest in good versus evil, which I've explored in several books. The nature of evil. Is it a choice? Is it hardwired in our genomes? A book called The Devil Will Come. I think my fifth book was about a young Italian nun who's the only person who can save the Vatican from a terrible historical plot involving men and women who are truly innately evil and have been for centuries. And I wanted to keep writing about the consequences of evil, and that led me to the ultimate locus of evil, which is Judeo-Christian concepts of hell. And obviously, hell has been a location that some writers far better than myself have used over the ages. Dante Alighieri being certainly writer uno in that regard. But still, I thought I came up with a notion of hell that I thought was really kind of fresh and exciting, which is a parallel universe where all the evil people who've ever existed go upon death, truly evil people, where you can never die. There's no escape from it, and because there's no way out, it becomes kind of a mashup of historical periods. So all the evildoers from the Stone Age to day before yesterday wind up in this amalgam universe called hell, and that way you can populate it with some of the great evil characters throughout history and lots of anonymous fictional characters as well. And then what if a portal between our world and this parallel universe opened, and allowed for some degree of unhappy communication between the two places, and that becomes this trilogy where the connections between Earth and Hell widen progressively over the course of 3 books to a kind of an apocalyptic conclusion.
That's awesome. And has that series been? I know you talked earlier about going like to book signings, and you really piqued people's interest with, and people trying to pin you down and make you answer questions. Do you get a lot of feedback from readers, and wanting to dig deeper into the story?
A tremendous amount. As it happens, Italy has become sort of my first market. I'm published with great frequency and vigor by my Italian publisher. So they are, and they had the idea of doing a kind of a rapid fire release of the trilogy, not rolling it out once a year as most of my other European publishers are doing. So in a course of about a year and a quarter, all 3 of those books came out, and they were all actually number 1 bestsellers in
Wow.
Italy. I've done a lot of book touring and press stuff over there. So it had. U.S. was the second market, and Spain is following in a couple months. France, et cetera, et cetera. So most of my touring experience has been in Italy, where I'm always a little bit sheepish getting up and giving a lecture in Florence, home of Dante,
Right.
about the sort of the pale comparison with his the greatest poetry that's ever been written, and my thrillers. So, but it's wonderful to have a receptive audience, and the Italians really eat the stuff up.
Yeah. Glenn, it's been such a pleasure to talk to you today. You've got a fascinating story. Like I told you when I emailed you a couple weeks ago, I had just recently discovered your work and have loved it ever since, and am working my way through your catalog. Tell people where they can find you and where they can connect with you and stay up to date on what you've got going on.
Well, GlennCooperBooks.com is my author portal, and all my stuff is on Amazon.
Excellent. And I've noticed that it looks like most of your, if not all of your works are in Kindle Unlimited. So if folks have a Kindle Unlimited subscription, they can kind of blaze right through your whole collection.
Yeah, I'm a dedicated KDP Select fan. I think it's a great option for self-published authors. I know there's a divergence of opinion around that, but it certainly has worked terrifically for me.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think it's one of those tools that everyone ought to at least experiment with and see, how it works for you and your works, for sure. So, Glenn, we're going to send everybody over to your website to come visit you and to pick up your books on Amazon. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to come on the show.
Thank you, Hank. I really appreciate it.